many people online. And again, a really big thank you to Matronics, Pentair, Fluidra and Hayward for sponsoring this session. Today's session is going to be about leading in the moment. I think a lot of you have sent in your leadership questionnaires, and I have done that scoring for you. And for those, the scoring that is complete, I've sent out those responses to you. So you should by now have an email from me with your scores on it and what they mean. But today what I'm going to do is go through those and explain what it all means to you and what those scores mean and what leading in the moment actually means as well. We hear somebody just turn their microphone on. I think you might be driving. So if you turn your microphone on, it means that we can hear exactly what's going on.
Thank you for calling SPASA. The swimming...
Somebody's on hold. Whoever's got their mic on and we can hear you, might be an idea to mute the mic just for the time being, if that's okay. So back to what we're doing today. Again, the plan for today, we're going to be looking at what it actually mean to you, and we'll look at what your preferred style of leading is. Now, some of you who have not done the questionnaire, please don't think that you can't be part of today's session.
Hey mate, you got volume on this thing?
Hi Don, can you hear me?
No, I'm talking about this seminar.
Yeah, no, can you hear me or not?
I can hear you, but I can't hear anything out of the seminar.
But can you hear me on the seminar?
No, I can hear nothing on the seminar.
Oh, well, that's good because remember I'm passive in the seminar.
No, I can't. So what I'm asking is, all I can see is Roz's face, but there's no sound.
But you can't hear it?
No.
I can't help you, brother. Are you on your phone or on your computer?
On my computer, but through my... what is going on? No, I lost you.
It looks like Dave's having trouble with hearing what's going on. We can hear him, but he can't hear us. So I'm hoping that my message has just gone through and that we can get you on mute, Dave, and that sometime we will be able to get you to be able to hear what I'm saying. If that doesn't happen, then the idea is perhaps to look at the recording once it's finished. But it would be great if you can sort that out and you can hear me. If you could indicate that you can hear me, that would be great. And we'll try and work this out as we go along, because this is the first time we're having a session that's fully interactive. So back to the schedule for today, we're going to look at what does leading in the moment mean and what's your preferred style of leading, because we all have one and we might not know it. It's a bit like the communications in action workshop that we just finished. People have their own way or preferred way of communicating with others. We also have our preferred way of leading with others as well. So we're going to look at versatility in the leadership sphere and what does that mean and why is that so important for you. Then we're going to take a look at some of these leadership results and how they fit into the grid that's leading in the moment and the implications for you and for your business. And if you've already received an email from me with your results, please don't stress about those results at all, because they're actually exactly what I was expecting. And the results overall were very good. I have to say that, they were very good. So today we actually take that into a deeper level so that you can start diagnosing situations with greater degree of accuracy and loads more confidence. So that's what we're aiming to do. So this is probably a very important screen for you to look at, and this is about how to communicate together today. So we need to get you to allow, when you click the meeting, to use your microphone and or your camera. If you don't want to be on camera all the time, that actually might make the platform a little bit more stable. And I'm not going to be on film the whole time either. When we get into this, I'll turn my video off, but I still would love to hear from you if at any time you've got a question or if at any time you want to make a comment, etc. The more interactive this session is, the better it's going to be. So as you can see on the screen there, we've got all of the details for you. you've got a little box at the top right-hand corner of the screen, and you'll see in that when you click on that, you actually have to click on it, you'll actually see that it will allow audio and video to commence. So once they're clicked, that should be great. If your microphone, as you can see on the screen, but point number two, it's red. So if you can click that, that will turn it green. That means we can hear everything, and we can hear everything that you're saying as well. So when you want to speak, and there may be a little bit of a lag as well, when you want to speak, please just cut in at any time, ask a question any time at all. I'm more than happy to do that. What you might also see is on the bottom right-hand side, in the chat area, we've got 8 people. And if you want to type a message and say, Ros, you know, or put your hand up, because there's a little hand right down the bottom right-hand side. If you want to put your hand up and say, I want to talk, please don't hesitate to do that either. But it'd be better if you just broke in, honestly, just break in, say something to me, because I probably won't be scrolling through the list the whole time to see who wants to put their hand up and who wants to speak. So if you just break in at any time you've got something to say, feel free to do that. If that works for all of us, hopefully we should be able to have quite an interactive day, which is what I'm aiming for. So without any more hesitation, if you would like to, we'll go and refresh a couple of things from webinar number 1 and webinar number 2. In the first webinar, we talked about creating the conditions for success. And today, one of those conditions for success that we're going to talk about is our leadership style, the doing and the being, because we talked about that as well. So how we actually lead our people is indicative of how much success or how successful we're making the conditions for them to work well. Because if you look at our picture here on this slide, when we were talking about the conditions for success, if we focus on what's happening with our people rather than the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, that's where we get the best amount of traction. And I will do a little bit of a pause in between each of these slides so that if you want to add a comment, you can do that. But fundamentally, what we're looking at is how are we leading our people and how are we creating an environment where we get the best out of them and get them to learn so they can step up to the plate. So we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to lead in a situation where people perhaps aren't performing the way we want them to perform. And in the conditions for success, obviously we've got behaviour and attitudes, and that we're going to look at today, and the skills and experience. So the green and the red are the areas that we're focusing on predominantly in this session. We looked at purpose last webinar, and resources and tools. We'll look at some of those as well in the next session. So when we've got the right skills matched with the right behaviour, that's when we get the best out of our people. How do we do that? It's the way we actually lead. And what happens if we're doing this the right way, we get them to give more commitment, we get them to buy into the process, we get them to want to engage and figure things out for themselves. And the one note I need to make at this point in time is that as a leader, don't think you always have to do the stuff, control everything, know all the answers, and make sure that people are doing what you want them to do the whole time. What our aim is to get people to be on a learning curve the whole time. And there are different stages depending on their skill and their capability, as well as their commitment and will or desire to want to do. So if we can create the desire for them to learn, to give things a go, and create an environment where it's okay for them to be able to say, well, yeah, I want to give it a go. Do you mind if I try this without you showing me what to do? Then we need to get to this level of understanding, is the skill level there? Is the commitment there? Now, if the skill level is there and they're not committed, there's stuff we can do. Likewise, if they're committed but they don't have the skill, we need to be aware of how we diagnose each situation on its own merit. Now, I'm going to turn myself off for a moment, turn the video off, but you'll still see or hear my voice. So we can go into the next part. The next slide shows you the doing and the being, and we've talked about that before in our last session as well. And the doing is the part of about creating the profit, the quantity, quality, risk, productivity, goals, etc. That was very much the focus of the webinar last session. What we're looking at today is you as a leader with your people, what kind of culture are we creating with the way we lead, and how are we communicating that? And do we have a clear sense of purpose, and do our people have a clear sense of purpose? So all of these things play a role in how we lead others. From the diagram that you can see in front of you now, it's just an idea to think, well, what kind of leader are you? Are you in amongst the troops trying to resolve issues together, or do you like to resolve the issues and then give the answers to your people, or do you like to forge ahead and show them a new direction altogether, and this is our possibility, what we can do? Or are you the one that sort of stands back and gives the direction and allows the people to work? And then we also have the one that is involved in everything, absolutely involved with a lot, controlling what people do, when they do it, and how they do it. And this will give you an indication of what we call the 4 types of leadership areas that we can look into to say, well, where do I fit? There's no right or wrong way. There are different types of leadership for different types of situations. And in this one, we can have the transformational leadership, which is at the top of the diagram, as you can see, and the transactional, which is at the bottom. On the left-hand side, we've got directive leadership, and on the right-hand side, we've got collaborative leadership. So what does that all mean? If we put the transformational kind of stuff together with the directive, we get someone who's very decisive. These people are really task-focused, and they like to control the decision-making, and that's a part of getting risk aversion, making sure that we mitigate the risks that we might be exposed to, that people have a clear understanding of what is expected of them, and that you show them exactly what is expected of them. And when decisions are made, it comes back to the leader. So the leader does like to take control of the decision-making process. So if I then move along to the right quadrant, or the inspirational quadrant, as you can see on the screen, you'll see this is a mix between collaborative leadership style and transformational leadership style. So inspirational leaders are the ones with the really big picture, and they really like to get people excited about their vision for the future. They like to get people engaged. They like to get people thinking, wow, in terms of possibilities, this almost seems as though, is it realistic? We can achieve this. But what they like to do is to show you a way of doing that. And they like to get everybody on board. Let's get, make this place bigger, better, brighter, more exciting. So they're very inspirational in the way they speak and the way they treat their people. Moving down to straight underneath the inspirational leadership, we've got the participative. So that's a mix of collaborative and transactional. And you might be wondering, the transactional stuff is more operational, if you want a different word for that. So it's the day-to-day stuff, like the systems, the processes, the procedures, the way we do work in our environment on a daily basis. So participative leaders really do focus on the relationship. And you're probably hearing a lot of terms that we've heard in the communications in action workshop. So you'll see that it starts to fit together a little bit. So participative, very much about the relationship and sharing decisions and participating, getting people to come on board, getting people to be involved, getting them to take some risk and some ownership, or quite a bit of ownership, so that we can get the day-to-day stuff done seamlessly and people can own their role. They own their decision-making, and they own the outcomes that they produce for you. Moving over to the left-hand bottom quadrant, we've got the controlled. So this is a mixture between directive leadership and transactional leadership. And the controlled leader is the one who's managerial in style. Classically, again, day-to-day routine, the stuff that we do day in, day out. We do it almost on autopilot. We know what's expected of us. We know how to do it. And our systems and our processes and following that routine is really, really important. The point about all of this is that it's not a static picture. In other words, we change. We change regularly, and it depends on the situation. So we're going to be moving into something called situational leadership soon. And the questionnaire that you were given via email is basically around situational leadership from Ken Blanchard, Ronald Hambleton, Zria Zigmari, and Douglas Forsyth. They built a tool which is called situational leadership, and I've adapted it particularly for SPASA and particularly for this program. So it's not exactly the same as their tool, but the principles are very similar. They don't cover this area that I'm talking about now, the decisive, inspirational, controlled and participative type leadership. The main point to remember is you might be sitting back and thinking, well, yeah, there's times when with one person I have to be controlled, and with another person I can be inspirational, or what I'd really like to be is more participative. So it does change, and one size does not fit all. We need to be able to slip in and out of any of those styles depending on the situation we are facing at any point in time. In this slide, you'll see some more examples of what this language is like. So directive leadership, they lead through the task. They're clear, they're firm, they overcome inertia, they make sure that there's no confusion going on. The participative leader leads through relationships and brings the best out in people. The transformational leader inspires others through really big, audacious goals, things that might not seem possible, but because they're with you and because they are leading the way and making sure or setting up the conditions so you can succeed, transformational leaders are really good when you want to change a business completely or re-transform it or come into a new, taking perhaps a merger and acquisition or taking on a new business altogether. And again, the leaders that are more operational or transactional, they are the ones that rely very heavily on systems and procedures and processes so that everything is kept neat and tidy and we don't make any mistakes and mitigate as much risk as possible. So as you can see, with the decisive, they're very clear on what they want to achieve. So very clear intent and very clear purpose. And they will relate that quite a lot to people all the time, not just once, all the time. So that message gets out there all the time. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is how we want to achieve it. And this is the direction that we're heading in. So that's very clear to everybody who's inside the business. And it gives alignment to the team in the sense that we know what our role is and we know where we fit in and we know what's expected of us. So it's a safe environment to work in because we're looking at the future the whole time and in terms of possibility, how we can improve our business model, our customer service, and we can create sustainability in the organisation. The decisive leader is also used to trigger change. And by that I mean, if there's a time for a change, the decisive leader will step in and say, okay, we've been doing it this way for a long time. We need to change the way we're doing stuff at the moment. So they will take a strong lead in that and say, and these are the reasons why we need to change. So again, it becomes very clear if they're going to make a change in the business, there's a very good rational reason why that's going to happen. And they will anticipate and remove obstacles so that people don't feel like they're going to fail. So, as I said, decisive action, they do take risks and they overcome inertia by making it possible for people to score goals along the way all the time by creating a sense of urgency and by being quite assertive. The inspirational leader likes to lead by example. So they will signal actions that we've got to get in. In other words, they'll be with you, they talk to you one-on-one, they talk to small groups, they talk to everybody, and they say, this is what we're trying to achieve. So everybody can get an understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve. And they get buy-in because they inspire people to want to work with them. Highly visible, very self-aware, so they've got a great deal of self-awareness and they take responsibility for their actions and they also take responsibility for the team's actions as well. very capable of making a hard decision, and their enthusiasm is almost infectious. So I think if you're thinking back to communications in action, this is very much like our visioner. The decisive is very much like our driver, but the inspirational is very much like our visioner. They are the team's champion. They will show pride in the work that the team produces, and they will publicise that. You know, they'll spread it out in the broader community. They let their colleagues know. They let other businesses know how good their team is. So they give credit to their staff and to themselves, but they do give credit to their staff when the staff are producing really good results. The participative leader, there's no guesses here. This is more like our harmonizer. These are the ones that care for people. They're the empaths in life. So they understand how other people are reacting in situations. And it's easier for the participative leader to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the other person, to understand what their challenges might be and what their challenges, how we can grow them, how we can develop them, give them the new skills. So they're very, very supportive, and they look after the career and personal development of their people. Very much into sharing information. So there's great transparency with these types of leaders. So they'll have regular meetings, and they're two-way. They expect to get feedback and give feedback, because that's the way we can improve things and move forward. So they'll give recognition, praise and thank you and rewards genuinely when they're deserved, and they're always interested in the other person more than themselves. They listen and they learn, and they seek input and ideas to utilise staff expertise. So the beauty about a participative leader is they'll bring the best out in people and let people have a go and become involved in what they want to be involved in. And then we've got the controlled leader, and this is more like the regulator, as we know. The controlled leader is rational, logical, disciplined. They like the systems, the procedures, the processes. They plan to within an inch of your life, so they know where the gaps are, and they can identify that. That's the talent that they bring to the table. They are also very much into briefing people about what their roles and their responsibilities are going to be like. So objectives will be very clear. Standards will be set, and you will know what those standards are, as well be the measuring systems to make sure that we know what we are expected to achieve and at what level we are expected to achieve. So they'll put systems and rigid structure around everything. Highly efficient. They concentrate on effort and will really concentrate on a task until they've completed it to the level of satisfaction that they require. So this constant notion of constant improvement for long-term sustainability is terribly important. And they'll monitor, assess and review as they go along. So you could probably think, okay, which one do I find as a preference for me? And it's a good idea to think now, which one do you think you really do take a preference for? I'm still checking to see if anybody wants to make any comments. So I'll stop for a second while I switch to the next slide. And if you've got any comments, please go for it. Now, when we talked about the different types, we can get two ends of the spectrum. And this is quite important. So for our decisive leader or our orchestrator, if they're too over the top, they can be viewed as being fanatical and it's just overbearing. So all of them have got their spectrums and the ends of the spectrum. So one end of the spectrum, you could be too fanatical, too over the top. This is way too much. It's almost like it's micromanaging. At the other end, if you don't like this area of leadership and you avoid becoming decisive, you can be seen as quite aimless, and people think, well, hang on, where are we heading? What is going on here? We do need some direction. So there are two ends to this spectrum in every single situation. We need to be aware of that because it can affect how we're leading others and how we think we're leading others. The inspirational leader, if they're too way over the top with their inspirational ideas and big ideas and we can achieve this and nothing is impossible, it can become a little bit evangelical, almost as though come to the water cooler and drink the Kool-Aid. So it's a bit over the top for people and they find that overwhelming. But if we think, oh, that's not me, I'm not that inspirational kind of leader, I can't do that stuff, then at the other end of the spectrum, people might think we're dull and boring. So they want to have a little bit of excitement put in there. And this is why we need a dose of each of these types of leadership styles. In the participative, if we have way too much participation from everybody and we don't move forward until we've got everybody's ideas and everybody's happy to move forward, we can be seen as quite weak, that we won't take a stand and we don't make a decision. So that can then affect the way people interact with us and interact with each other, because then it becomes a bit of Rafferty's rules, because nobody's strong enough to say, stop, enough is enough. But on the other end, if there's no participation at all and we don't have any of this collaboration going on, we can be seen as being quite heartless. It's like people do want to know that their leader has got a heart. And then for the controlled, we can get one end of it, we become robotic, mechanical, lacking feeling. This is a soulless place to work. It's just too rigid, too stiff. Or if we don't like control and we avoid it, we can then be seen as chaotic. So the challenge is, my goodness, how do we get something of each of these into our leadership style? And that's actually the aim. That's completely the aim. To know at times I need to be inspirational, but at other times I'll have to be controlled. And at times I can be participative, but at other times I need to be quite decisive. And it all depends on the situation that we're confronted with at any point in time. Any questions before I move on? Nope. Okay. Now, when I talked about leadership, it's a two-way street. So what I need to do, we've got our competence and we've got the competence of the people that work with us. So I want to give you the analogy of what it's like to drive a car and what happens when we're driving a car. So for a start, when we're children, or if you've got children, or if you were ever a child and you were sitting in the back of a car on a long trip with your parents, it gets boring and children start fighting and saying, when are we there? Are we there yet, or whatever? That's because they don't know what they don't know. So in other words, I don't know what I don't know. They're unaware that there are road rules, that there's an accelerator, a brake, that there are indicators, that you have to stay in your lane of traffic, that you can only go a certain speed, and that you are driving to keep everybody safe. They don't get that. They just know that they're captive in the back of the vehicle and it's boring. That's it. So this I don't know what I don't know is the level of what we call unconscious incompetence. So we can be incompetent and not even know it. And that's the big challenge with this one. And it does happen. It might be very much the case for if you've ever had to plug in a brand new piece of software into a computer and how to get it up and launch it. You don't know anything about it, and you don't know that you don't know, and you don't know what works and what doesn't work. So that's what unconscious incompetence is like. Then by about the age of 16, we get to a level where we get our L plates and we start to drive. And suddenly we know what we don't know. And this is all a little bit scary, particularly the first time you're out on the road and set free amongst other people. So it can be a very daunting kind of a situation. And suddenly it becomes overwhelming. And some people can freeze because at this point in time, it's a case of I'm now conscious about my incompetence and it worries me. I need to get better at this. And this is the same with the development of our people in our organisation as well. When they're consciously aware that they don't know how to do stuff, how do they communicate that to you? How do you know, or what signals do they give you that they aren't competent and they're aware that they're not competent? But then with a bit of time and a bit of practice and some more energy, we get to the point where we know that we know. And that's where you hear the doof doof music and going fairly fast on P plates, 10 foot tall and bulletproof, because they know how to drive. They know what they know. And and it's obvious. So they're now consciously competent. So driving is fun, having control of the vehicle is fun, I'm doing my work, I'm relaxed about it, and I just go on my merry way. And, you know, I might have to think about it occasionally, but at least I know what I'm doing. And then you get to the point of what we call our a point where I don't know that I know. In other words, it's like when we're driving a car and we get home after a long journey, maybe from work, you pull up in the driveway and you go, wow, I don't even remember getting here. So how did that happen? And that's what we call our unconscious competence. So with our unconscious competence, we do it and we don't know why we're good at it. We know we're good at it, but we don't know why. And it's hard to express that. This is probably where leaders come in with when you're leading your people and thinking, I'm not sure why they're not getting it, or I don't know how to explain what I need to tell them. I know how to do it, but I can't really put it into words why I'm good at what I do. And that's classically what happens, and I've seen this in the results from the surveys, where we might be unconsciously quite competent, but I don't know how to explain to somebody else why I'm so good at what I'm doing. Now, this is fundamentally how we go through the learning curve as adults as well. So we go through these various stages and we get to this point of unconscious competence. The thing is, at any stage, we might have a staff member that we know who's unconsciously competent, really good at what they do, really good at enjoying their work and maybe even leading teams, etc. So we give them a new job to do. And what can happen is, if you give them something entirely new, entirely different to do that they haven't seen or experienced before, then what can happen is they can go right back to the level of being unconsciously incompetent again, because it's suddenly like, oh, I haven't done this before. How does this work? So this model is important for us to know, as well as for our people to, when we're using our leadership style for different people. So what I want to do now is to just leave you with that, to think about that one. And then what we're going to do is overlay this into what we call the competence grid and the leading in the moment grid. And I'll explain each one as we're going through so that you get the picture and understand where we're coming from. If at any time any of my explanations don't make sense to you, please just interject, because this is the point that we need to get where you're comfortable with what I'm talking about. So for leading in the moment, we've got two axes. We've got one axis on the left-hand side, which is the knowledge and the skills, or the capability, and it goes from low to high. So we've got low knowledge or skill or low capability to high. And then on the bottom axis, from the left to the right, we've got the willingness, and that's the behaviour and the attitude, or the commitment, that level of commitment. And this is around the level of that discretionary energy that I was talking about in an earlier slide. Do we have that discretionary energy coming out, and is it obvious? So that's what the grid actually looks like. So if we start to build it, and we start from the low end, so if I don't have any skill and I don't have any will, what is required here as a D1, and I want you to look at that number, the D1, that means my development stage as your employee is at level 1. So level 1 means I don't really have the confidence to do this. I get that you want me to give it a go, but I really don't know what I'm doing. So I would rather you help me, or give me a hand, or help me build my confidence, or coach me, or give me a mentor, or train one-on-one. These people need more time. And these are the ones where if they're new to a skill completely, then they need to be taken through the process so that they can learn it, adopt it, and make it their own. So D1 is where you've got either somebody who's brand new to your business, or if you go back to that model I just showed you, someone who's good at what they've been doing, and now you give them something completely different to do. Their confidence might be shaken. So that's what the will is. It's not so much that they don't want to do it, They might be too frightened to do it, or worried that they'll let you down, or worried that they'll make an error that they can't fix because the skill isn't there. So that's what I mean by the will and the skill. So when they're down, we need a type of leadership is directive. So when we look at that one, their motivation may be low as they lack the skills and the confidence. So what we need to do is to work on their skill and their confidence as a leader. So I need to make sure that they're okay before I'm okay. And this is now that you'll see that the leadership style is the heading, and the leadership style is called an S1, directive. I give them step-by-step process. I show them exactly what I want them to do. I spell out very clearly what the achievement standards or the success standards are going to be like. And I get them to sit with me as I demonstrate what is needed. I then give them, perhaps I could give them some instructions or a manual or whatever it's going to be so that they can follow through once we've gone through this one-on-one to get them to the level where they're confident to give it a go for themselves. So we need to remember that when they're in for an S1 or situational one, directive style of leading, we need to be very aware that we show these people what they need to do at any point in time. Because if you sit them in front of a PC and you show them a pile of invoices that need to be processed, and then you go and leave them and say, well, good luck, you'll be fine. It's like throwing them in the deep end of a swimming pool without any floaties and they still don't know how to swim. So it really affects people's confidence. It really affects their level of engagement. And it has a very adverse effect on the business at large because you're exposing yourself to a lot more risk. So that's fundamentally the first one that we look at. The next one on the competence scale is our D2. This is the learner. This is the staff member. This is where we go into coaching. They need coaching. Their will is high. So in other words, they're keen to give it a go, keen to try it, but the skill might not be up to par. They might be making careless mistakes. You might wonder why they make mistakes. You might think, well, they shouldn't have made that mistake. So what's going on? So for this particular situation, they've got some of the relevant skills, but they can't do the job completely without some help. So it could be that the situation or the task is new to them. It could be, or it could be that there's been an expectation or an assumed knowledge that they get it. Because what happens quite often, we say, we might show them what they've got to do. And then we say, so do you understand? And they go, yeah. Because of course they're going to say yes, because they want to please you, but they may not have that skill. So this is a trap for a lot of people. Where are they at this point in time? And it is, you got to think about what it is. Where's the will, like their excitement and they want to do it, and where's the skill level? For this one, the coach, we need to make sure that this is, if it is a new skill, we kind of go back to a bit of directive, but we want a bit more input from them. So we need to make sure that they're okay. You as the leader, you need to identify what the problem or the task is. You need to set the goals and you need to define what the roles are going to be. We have to develop an action plan to solve problems, and then we chat with that about our person. We explain our decisions and we seek their ideas, but we continue to direct the work and evaluate the work as we go along. So that's what we mean when it changes into this one. Your leadership style that you require for this one is the S2. So with this one, just remember that your people here will really thrive when you give them those clear goals, plus also the big picture perspective and how they fit into that. They need to have an explanation of your decisions. Why did you make the decision that way? That helps them get clarity and that makes them feel more confident. They also require praise, feedback, and encouragement along the way. Yes, corrective feedback as well, but equal doses of corrective and praise. And assurances from you that it's okay to make a mistake if it's a little mistake, because if you're exposing them to making a big mistake, then you haven't led them properly in that situation, because they need more confidence from you that they're not going to get this wrong. Some involvement in problem solving and decision making, that will make them feel as though they're more included, and it will make them take ownership of their actions. So that's the important thing to remember here when you're coaching them. And feedback about their results, how they're doing at any point in time. That's a big requirement for this area. So the next one that we go to on the competence or the skill will, these are your people again, is the D3, as you can see in the top left-hand quadrant. This is the level where the development level of your people here. Again, you've got the will could be variable, and there could be lots of reasons for this. And the skill is there. You feel you're confident with them, but it's the will that's the problem. And the reason for that is basically around, maybe they feel exhausted, maybe they feel overwhelmed, maybe they feel unsupported. There could be any number of reasons. The only way you're going to find out about a variation in their will is by asking them what's going on. And that means we've got to give them a lot of support. So these people, again, need clear goals. They need access to their coach. And if that's you, they need access to you. They need opportunities to discuss their concerns so that they can talk it through and know they've been heard. So support and coaching, a little bit of coaching goes in here as well to develop their problem-solving capability and their decision-making skills. That will give them greater confidence to take on the tougher tasks. They also want to have an opportunity to show their initiative. So if they're getting too much direction and too much rigidity in their day-to-day routines, they might think, well, what's the point? There's nothing exciting here for me to do. So they want to be able to show you that they can do the job and get the opportunity to do that. Praise and recognition is very important for these people. And your job as the leader now, particularly when you think about that word support, is to make sure that if there are any obstacles or challenges to them achieving their targets, we need to take care of that. As a leader, that's our job. We need to make sure that we eliminate as many as possible. We can't eliminate all, but we need to make sure that we are not setting them up for failure. That's the most important part here. So in this particular type, for our support, they might have experience and be capable, but they lack the confidence to do it alone, or the motivation to work well or quickly. So it could be time, the way they get their stuff done. That could be another issue for you. So as our leadership style, what we've got to do here is involve them as much as we can. This is what an S3 means. So we involve them in identifying the problems and setting their own goals. We allow them, that doesn't mean giving them license to set all their own goals. It's involvement in setting their goals. So we allow the team member to take the lead in defining how the task is to be done. So we ask them, so how do you think it should be done? What's your understanding of this situation? What would you do to resolve this problem? Rather than telling them, because they've got skill, pull it out of them. And that's what they're waiting for. They want you to pull it out of them because it's there. It might just be latent. So we need to provide assurance and support and the resources and the ideas if we're asked. So we also need to make sure that we're available if they need that, because that's really important for them as well. They like to share the responsibility for solving problems and making decisions along the way. So we need to get their involvement either as a team or as an individual, and we need to evaluate their work. And again, that praise and recognition for when they're achieving. So that support, another reason that they might be in this quadrant is because they don't feel as though they matter anymore. And that's where that will can become variable. So again, that discretional energy, that might just drop off. And that's an indicator. You kind of think, well, they were really good before, so why aren't they good now? And that might be one of the reasons why, because they don't feel as though they're supported. So in our fourth quadrant, what we've got is very high will and very high skill. Now in this one, these people we can delegate, and they are the D4 at the developmental stage. So they're experienced at the job, they're comfortable with their own ability, and they do it well. In some cases, they might even be more skillful than you, and that can happen quite a bit. So with the D4, the development stage 4, we need to take on a different style of leadership, which is to delegate. So with our delegators, these people, as I said, again, they need clear goals, they need variety, and they need challenge. Because if we don't, they'll get bored, their discretionary energy falls off, and you might find that they are looking elsewhere for more stimulation. And for some people, that can be making trouble. Not everybody, but some people that could be making trouble because they don't feel they're being challenged anymore, and they want that. So they need to see you as more a partner rather than their leader. You're a colleague. You might even become more of a mentor than their boss. So, you know, it's that feeling of I'm your equal and I'm capable of doing this job well, and that I'm getting recognition for it. So autonomy and having the authority to act without you telling them to act is very important. Sure, the buck stops with you. I'll get to that in a minute. But we need to give them the freedom to act so that they can learn, and so that we also are demonstrating to them that we trust them. So this is a big thing about trust. So we acknowledge their credits and acknowledge them and give them credit for their achievements. And we make sure that they know that we're appreciative of their efforts and their contribution to the business. So feedback often, when you've got somebody who's high will and high skill, falls off. We need to make sure that it doesn't. They still need feedback. They need it regularly so that they know that they're still performing. And as a leader, always ask them how they think they should resolve a problem. And if you feel it's a low risk maneuver, allow them to act without you having your finger in the pie and in the mix. Let them act on their own so that they can take ownership and responsibility of potential problems that come up. Again, setting goals and targets. This one, instead of like the others where we get, for example, in the supporting, we get their input. Here, you want them to set their own targets and their goals, and then we collaborate. So rather than them just going off and doing it, you get them to do it, and then you have the discussion with them, and you say, okay, what have you come up with? And give me a rationale why you think these goals and these targets are good for your role and your career. Get them to build their own action plans, because they should be quite capable of doing that, and controlling their decisions about what tasks they do, how they do them, and how effectively they do them. Allow them to evaluate their own work. In our next webinar, we're going to talk a lot more about this. So when I talk about allowing them to evaluate their own work, we're going to do feedback. And in that model, it's around, you tell me what you've done well, you tell me what you could have done differently and why. And that's basically what we do when we're in that delegate area as our leadership style. We kind of, in a way, become more hands-off. But as I said before, the buck still stops with you. So delegation does not mean abdication. It means that I still have ownership and I'm still responsible for what they do in my business, but I don't control them. I give them the freedom because I know they've got the capability to do what they do, and they do it well. Are there any questions at this point in time from anyone?
Rosa, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Chelsea speaking.
Yeah.
Hi. I was just looking at these 4 quadrants, and I'm seeing them sort of roughly align with the personality types that we talked about in the workshops. And I'm wondering if you think this is an opportunity to sort of create mentor pairings, like put a regulator in a position where they're working with the S1 people and directing them, or do you think it's more about the one leader but changing their style to fit the people? Would you sort of create a leadership team? Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, good question, Chelsea. Thank you. It's interesting. If you go, I'll go back to slide 9. And on slide 9, we had that there's the transformational, transactional, collaborative, and directive. If you look at these styles, the decisive is the orchestrator, the inspirational is the visioner, the participative is the harmonizer, and the controlled is the regulator. They don't, I know you kind of think, why not? But they don't actually overlap to these. It's actually a different thing. So you might think that the direct is like the orchestrator. Yes, I get that. But even a harmonizer, which is a diametric opposite, the visioner and the regulator will all have to be directive at a certain point in time. Because what this leadership model is around, and you've seen the slides look slightly the same, almost exactly the same. So if I went from, say, this one, which is your level of development, so that's D1, D2, D3, and D4, that's the level of development or competence and will of your people. And now with these ones, this is the leadership style that's required. And yes, they're exactly parallel, but they are different things. So the direct leader has to be very, very clear. This might be somebody who's just been exposed to this for the first time in their life. So they'll have no idea how to approach the task, or they might be brand new to your organisation. So they need lots of structure and lots of safety. So any style. Naturally, the harmonizer, the orchestrator will be very good at being directive, generally speaking, but even orchestrators sometimes take it for granted that people understand what they're saying. It's around our clarity, and it's around how clear we are with our directions and concise, so that they really understand what we're talking about. And when we get into the coaching, it's more like on-the-job training. Sure, harmonizer would be great for that, as would, I'd say, a regulator. The orchestrator and the visioner might be too busy to think they can coach, but they need to. We need to learn those skills. We need to make sure that we do take the time to coach them. In the support, you would think that that's just naturally a harmonizer lives there. Sure, they do, but all the others have to be able to know how to support their staff as well. Because if we don't support them, they start drowning, and that's when we lose their productivity. And again, with the delegate, you would think, yeah, visioners, freedom to act, definitely, or even the orchestrator's freedom to act, off you go. It depends on the level of skill of the individual. You can have a harmonizer who should be being delegated to, and the orchestrator says, well, no, I don't see how that works. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but what I want you to focus on is it's the level of skill and will of the individual and what type of leadership style we need at that point in time, if that makes sense. Has that answered your question, Chelsea?
Yeah, that works for me. Thanks. It's more about the individual and then tailoring their particular leadership style. Yeah, I like it. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anybody else got any questions about this? Nope, nothing coming through. Okay. So remember your team style at a level 1, a D1, very highly dependent on you. They need you to make life safe for them. We can't throw them in the deep end without the floaties. They definitely need that from their leader. Otherwise, they will never thrive. And that'll be the person who you think, oh, look, they're just too much hard work. I've got to get rid of them. Something probably went wrong in the beginning so that they didn't get those foundations in place. Now, it might be your role to do that for them, or you might have a team member who can help them in this situation. But generally speaking, when you really do have somebody in that high dependency state, as a leader, I have to ask myself, what am I prepared to invest in this individual? If I want to get them and their foundations right, this is where I need to spend my time. It's the Pareto rule. 20% of people will take 80% of your time. But if we get this right at this level in the D1, they can escalate through the others very quickly to become a self-reliant achiever. They can even go straight there if we do it well in the first place. Remember, our D2, they're enthusiastic. So skill, a bit dodgy, but really keen, really eager to please you, encourage that. Because these people will walk over hot coals for you if you ask them to, particularly if you recognise them for that enthusiasm and you give them that structure. And that's basically what they're looking for, a bit of structure, a little bit of one-on-one time so that they know how to do stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that every single time they repeat that task, you have to go over and over and over and over again. You don't. It's making sure that the first time we do it, it's great. You've shown them exactly what to do. The second time they do it, you might be there watching them so that you can butt in if need be. And the third time you say, okay, you go and do it and show me what you're doing and why you're doing. Because that's what we're doing. We're trying to get them up to that level where we're coaching them to take ownership for their actions. And then when we get to the D3, highly capable but cautious. They may have been burnt. They may think this is out of their depth. They may think they don't have the authority to act. They may think, oh, what more can I do? I'm trying my hardest. I don't have the capability to do this at the moment. They do, but they're probably cautious because they don't want to make a mistake or let you down. So in this one, it's more around that support. What support do you need? Is it resources? Is it time? Is it people power? What is it you need from me to make you confident to go forward? So that caution there is a signal to you they're not feeling comfortable about something. And the self-reliant achiever, again, you know, they can do this stuff, so let's let them. Because if we let them, that's great for them. It gives them that confidence and it gives them that feeling that you really value them as somebody in your business. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, for those of you who have not done the leadership questionnaire, what I would recommend is you do the questionnaire. There are 20 scenarios. I would like to go through all of them with you to show you exactly what each of those questions is about. But I've not done that today on purpose because I think we'll carry this over to the next webinar that we're going to hold. And in that next webinar, I'm going to talk more about how we give feedback, how we collect feedback, and how we go through the coaching process. And what I can do then, so anybody who has done the questionnaire already, I've sent you your results. Those who haven't done it, if you get it to me, I will definitely do the scoring and the analysis and get the results to you. But now what I want you to do is to plug it into the different scenarios from the models that I've shown you today. And the big one that most people get challenged on is the coaching and the supporting. So we can tend to coach when we need to support or support when we need to coach. So I'm hoping that my explanations today have really explained what the coaching and the supporting look like and the type of characteristics you see in an individual when we have to coach or when we have to support. And the majority of the feedback that I've received so far from everyone doing their questionnaires, these are the two areas where people feel most comfortable, and that's very natural. And the two that most people are quite unaccustomed to using are the delegating and the directive. And that may be because you think, well, my staff don't need it, or I'm not there yet with the trust level to delegate, or it could be any number of reasons. But in the scenarios that I presented in that questionnaire, there's quite a balance of the 4 different styles of development and the 4 different styles of leadership required to be really effective. So I'm seeing flexibility in all of you. I'm seeing that you are using the range of leadership styles in situations. It's around the effectiveness. If we could tie that down and get that right and start making sure that we're diagnosing the situation the right way, that will help us become more effective as a leader. And to do that, that's where we need this feedback and the coaching, because that's really, really critical as a leader to make sure that we're using the appropriate style with our people at the appropriate time. And the last thing I want to leave you with is don't forget it's not static. It's not one size fits all. Different situations require a different style of leadership. If there are no further questions, and I will stay here for a moment. If there are any questions or feedback or anybody wants to have a chat, more than happy to do that. But that brings me to the end of today's session. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you. No questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. I can hear somebody.
I think that's me.
It's you.
Yeah.
Did
Rosie,
yeah.
Nina, with the different personality styles and the different classifications you've gone through with how to coach them within their role, is how often have you seen it in the workplace where the employer has given them like a personality test, like the DISC profile or something to work with, so that anything can almost be pre-diagnosed, or you can keep an eye on things straight off the bat instead of working your way down and then finding that you've got to change how you're doing things? Like, is there anything like that, or do you recommend that?
Well, not. It's really hard to make a sweeping statement that we can offer that kind of diagnostic. When we do the communications in actions and we do the personality styles, generally speaking, we can make some very loose connections. And the loose connections are that the orchestrator would be more inclined to want to be able to get to having jobs delegated to them quickly, because they feel if they've got that freedom to act, that they'll do it well. And they naturally take power and they naturally take control, because that's where they're most comfortable. So we can kind of assume that they would want to go straight into the delegating. The challenge is we still have to just make sure that they've got the skill, because if they're new and they're brand new to the business, they might be bringing a certain amount of skill with them. Have they got all of the skills that I'm looking for? So it's just kind of, it's a blend of the two, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, yeah, does that?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. But if you want more stuff or more information from me, don't hesitate to just reach out, Anita, because I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Rosa. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. And I don't think anybody else is cutting in. So that might be it, folks. See you at the next one. Bye.